Our next guest is Debby Montgomery Johnson. She's the author and founder of The Woman Behind the Smile Incorporated. She's also the chair of the board of directors of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. Hi, Debby. How are you?
Good morning, Davelle. I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So, just to give people a little bit of background on your story, you were a victim of an online dating scam. After your husband died, you become an advocate to help make people aware of how this can happen to them. And, you gave over $1 million to your online partner who, of course, over a number of years had you feeling loved and safe and cared for in a way that you hadn't experienced. And because you had just dealt with the sudden death of your husband, unfortunately, this was, something that you fell victim to. How can you tell us a little bit more about how your story unfolded?
Well, excuse me, it unfolded a little bit differently than most people's because at the very end, he actually came on and we were online on I have brain cramp. We were texting, but it wasn't texting. It was Yahoo chat. And he came on one morning and said, how do you feel about forgiveness? And we had this long discussion about forgiveness. And then after a while, I finally said, what did I do? And he said, you didn't do anything. I have a confession to make. And that was the beginning of the end for me. But it was a very interesting thing where he actually came online because I thought when he said he had a confession that he was going to tell me something that was going to hurt me.
Yeah.
It really did hurt me because he confessed that it had been a scam.
Wow.
And at that point, after 2 years, I'm thinking, how could somebody lie to me for 2 years? I'm a pretty intelligent person. But my heart was stolen. He hijacked my heart and my head and everything else.
And your wallet, of course.
And my wallet. Ben, you said $1 million. I didn't have $1 million, but I found it. And I think any of us that feel that someone has become part of our family would do anything for our family.
And how did he justify his behavior? When he said that to you, when he came up to the truth to you, how did he justify that? What did he say to you?
There was no justification. It was more like, why did he confess it in the first place? Because most of them don't do that.
Yeah.
And he just felt that he couldn't do it anymore. But he did want our relationship, our friendship to continue. And I'm sitting there going, are you out of your mind? Because at this point, I see him. I hadn't seen him for 2 years. And when he had the confession, I told him he needed to prove it, or I thought he was lying to me now. And so he actually came online on the Yahoo chat camera, which I didn't know about. And I saw this young, dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-skinned young man. And he had a big smile on his face. And that was my brick moment when I saw a face to the crime. And that was really important because most victims never have that closure. And it was important for me because if he had just disappeared, and I would have thought he was dead. And worse than when my husband passed away because now I was out all that money.
Oh, my God.
So for me, that was a really important closure moment. And I can talk to victims and survivors today and say, if you need to see a face, look at that face. That's the face of the scammer, of the criminal.
Wow.
Which is true with the report that was sent to me about the guy up in Toronto that's missing right now, the APB.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that young man. That's the face right now, although there's many faces. But that is one face you can concentrate on and say, that's not the real person, but that's the person that defrauded me out of all that money.
Wow. So now that you kind of look back on your experience, were there any kind of red flags that you're thinking? You just mentioned this was your brick moment. Were there any other, knocks on the door or red flags that you thought that you ignored over the last 2 years of your relationship?
Well, there are a lot of red flags. I can look back now, 2020, but at the time I felt that they were pink flags. I called them pink flags because I'd had such good experience I was an Air Force officer, I was a former banker. There were things that just weren't happening that I felt kind of funny about, but when I questioned him, he always had an answer. There was always a plausible reason why, the money I was sending to him or whatever I was getting to him was being sent back, or not the money, but I sent a book, I sent a letter, I sent things to his family members, and they all got sent back, and he had reasons for those. Why he didn't pay me back, at the time it was a lot of a business expense for him. I own a company, he owns a company. I know sometimes you don't get paid until the job's over with, so he wasn't getting paid until the end, but the things in the Far East that he dealt with that I didn't really understand were the tariffs and the customs issues he was having over there. And it all made sense, but it was very frustrating because we couldn't ever get past them. there was that up and down of the emotions where he's coming, he's not. We set up, I remember setting up a hotel for his sister and his son and he to come over here for Christmas. And right before they were supposed to get here, it got canceled. So it's that up and down of the emotions. And the red flags were, I spent a lot of money. I didn't realize it. Well, I did realize it, but it didn't affect me because he always promised he was going to pay it back. There was always that promise of it's coming back. And I know that's part of that case, too, that is up in Toronto. You're always told you're going to get reimbursed.
Right.
And I believed that. This was 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and I had no reason to believe someone was lying to me
of
all
course.
that time.
And so what are you telling others about how to avoid these kinds of scams?
Well, the first thing is if you're looking for love online, and this isn't just happening to people on romance dating sites, it's happening on Words with Friends, on Facebook, on LinkedIn,
it's everywhere.
Every social media platform. Just be really careful. And I always say get a dating buddy. So I was actually looking at some of the things you've done, and you had a gal on recently, the dating coach, who actually sets up profiles for people and does things, vets them. So find a dating buddy that can help you put out a good profile, but when you get responses back, they can help you assess, because within 2 weeks, the scammers are very manipulative. There's an art to that and a psychology to the scam. They know how to get you to reel you in, and within 2 weeks, if you're not out of it within 2 weeks, then you're in. And I always say if you haven't seen the whites of their eyes in 2 weeks, then it's a scam. But I've seen people that have been scammed in person after living with someone for a while. So just be really careful. Obviously, it's the don't send money. At the time I started sending money, he had become a friend. He had become part of my family, and that's what they do. They groom you, and they just make you feel like you're a safe part of their family. And so even when I would go the first time I sent money, I sent it through Western Union. I'd never done that before. It was very uncomfortable for me to do that. And at the time, the Western Union person said, well, do you know this man that you're sending this to? It wasn't the name of Eric Cole. It was to one of his friends. I questioned that. Why am I sending this to a different name? And he said, because my friend lives over in Malaysia, and he knows the company that were, the Western Union people there, and he can get it for me. Again, another answer, but I didn't know him. So I wouldn't give $1 million away to somebody on the street that I didn't know. How I could have done this over 2 years, it was a process. I didn't have it, but I did it.
Wow.
So I would be really careful. It's the don'ts, which at the time, my boys would say that. My older boys said that to me. And I'm like, guys, I'm an adult here. Leave me alone.
Wow.
And I shut my kids out. So if you feel like you're being isolated from your family, that's the point. They want to isolate you from everybody so that you're only listening to them.
Oh, my God. That just sounds terrible. Listen, we've got about 30 seconds, but I'm just kind of curious left to find out, have you been able to date somebody else ever since? How has this affected you?
I remarried 9 years ago. And
amazing.
I met my husband through a dating service, a matchmaker here down in South Florida. And it was friends of ours who were matchmakers, and it was lovely.
That's wonderful.
Lovely.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been very interesting.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, and keep getting the word out. It's really important.
Absolutely.